So now in this part, we're going to work on the bottom of the pommel by creating a hint of a tang sticking out. Then we're going to create the handguard, and then finally we'll start working on the blade itself. First up, we're going to create the tang sticking out of the bottom of the pommel. Now let's select all the vertices on the bottom by holding Alt, right click on that edge loop, then hold Alt and Shift and right click on that one. Now let's go into bottom view by pressing Control and numpad 7. And let me zoom in and center this. Now let's press E to extrude these, and then immediately press S to scale that extrusion in. Now the middle two faces are going to be the size and shape of the tang, so I think that looks about right to me. I'll left click there. Now let me press the N key for the right side toolbar, and I'll scroll up to the top, and I'll decrease the mean bevel weight to 0. Some of those edges had a bevel weight because they were being extruded from other edges that had a bevel weight, so it just maintained the same bevel weight as their parent edges. So some of these edges were being actually beveled by that modifier. We didn't need it, so I just turned that down to 0. Let me press the N key to get rid of that. Now, like I said, these middle two faces are the tang. So let's square that off by selecting these two vertices. Now press S to scale them in until the ends are nice and flat. Just like that. And let me select all of these vertices now. I'll press X and erase the faces. So you can see our tang right now is actually kind of oblong. I want to sharpen up the corners a little bit. So we can do that by adding some knife cuts. Let me press the K key, and I'll click on that vertex and then click on that vertex and press enter. And it makes a knife cut through there, adding extra vertices right near the corners, and that sharpens things up a little bit. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. Press K for the knife tool, click on that vertex, click on that one, and then press enter. There we go. Now we're going to be using a tool called Inset, and what that does is it extrudes all of our vertices inward proportionally, but it doesn't work on gaps. So we're going to need to face this back up. The only reason I deleted those faces in the first place is to see how square our corners were so that we could fix that. So let me hold Alt, right click on that edge loop there, and I'll press the F key to create an end gun. And I actually think it might be a little bit too thick anyway. So let me scale that in. I'll press S and then Y and reshape that a little bit to be more rectangular. All right, I think that looks good. Now we need to restore the topology in the middle because I don't want a big end gun there. I want to work with quads. So what I can do is select these two vertices and press J, and it'll create an edge between them. Then I'll select these two and press J, creates an edge between them, but also an extra vertex upon any edges it intersects. This is a really cool tool. So now I'll select those two and press J, and there we go. We have a nice rectangle of quads now. So now let me press B, and I'll left click and drag over all those vertices there, and now we can get started on the tang. So now to activate the Inset tool, we press the I key, and you can see everything's being extruded in proportionally around each side. So I'll extrude that inward to right there and then left click. So the faces I have selected now are actually going to be the end of the tang, but we have to make it look like it's coming out of the pommel. So to do that, we'll add a couple of edge loops through here, and then we'll push one of them up and into the pommel. So I'll press Control and R, and while I'm hovered over that area, I'll scroll up on the mouse until I have two cuts like that, then left click and right click to keep them in the middle. Now let's hold Alt, right click on that edge right there to select that loop. Then I'll rotate the view, and we'll press G and then Z and move that up on the Z axis into the pommel like that, and then left click. All right, I think that's a good depth, maybe just a little bit more up on the Z axis, and that looks good. And now let me press Control numpad 7 for bottom view. I'll press A to deselect those vertices. Now I'll press B and left click and drag over those vertices right there, and just those vertices. So this is the tang, and we're going to make it protrude just a little bit more by rotating the view. Then I'll press G and then Z and move it down a little bit so it's sticking out a touch. And let me press B, and I'll middle click and drag over them to deselect, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. And then I'll press G and then Z and move this down a little bit, just to round off the ends a little so they're not so squared. All right, I think that looks good. But I want to tighten up, I want some tighter bevels around the rim of this thing. So what I'll do is press Control and R right through there to add a loop cut, left click, and then to align it with the bottom edges, I'll press E. And you should see a red dot at the bottom. If for some reason you see it at the top, what you can do is press the F key to switch direction. So make sure the red dot's at the bottom. That means it's aligned with those edges, and we'll bring that down for a sharper bevel to right there. All right, there it is. And that'll do it for the tang. Cool. And that actually does it for the whole handle. All right, with the handle out of the way, let's move on to the handguard. at the top of that. And first I'll center the cursor. So let's press Shift and S and choose cursor to center. And now I'll press numpad 7 for top view, and make sure you're in object mode because we want this to be a separate object. And now I'll press Shift and A and add in a mesh circle. And then I'll immediately press the T key, and let's change the number of vertices down a little bit lower to 26. And then press T to get rid of that. Now tab into edit mode, and we'll press S to scale these down so that they're just a little bit bigger than the top of the handle there. And now let's press numpad 1 for front view. And I'll press G and then Z, and we'll sit that right on top of the handle, like that. Now press G and X, and we'll move it all the way over here to match up with the end on the photo there. Now let's press numpad 7 for top view, and press A to deselect everything, and then press B, and left click and drag over all the left side vertices. Then press X and delete the vertices. Now I want to mirror this to the other side, so let's add in a mirror modifier. And I'll press the Z key for wireframe to make sure it mirrors over there correctly. And now let's select these two vertices here, and I'll press numpad 1 for front view. Then press E and X to extrude it over to the left, right where that handguard starts to bend, and then drop it there. And now in order to get these to merge in the middle, we're going to turn on the clipping option in the mirror modifier. That makes it so when they reach the center, it just stops right there and it merges with the other side. Let me cancel that. So now we're going to extrude this to the center, so I'll press E and then X to extrude it to the left, right to the middle until they collide, and then I'll left click there. Alright, now let's face this area up. So I'm going to select the end two vertices there, and I'll just keep pressing F until it faces it up to the center. Now let's press numpad 1 for front view. I'll press Z to go into wireframe, and then press A to deselect everything. Now we're going to bend this. So I'll press B, and left click and drag over all those vertices, and I want to bend this around these vertices right here. So what I'll do is I'll hold Shift, I'll right click on that vertex to deselect it, then right click on it again to select it. You can see that it's highlighted now. That makes it the active selection, and now we can rotate around that. So let me press numpad 1 for front view again. And down in the header here, in the pivot point menu, let's switch it over to active element. That means it's going to allow us now to rotate or scale based on the position of our active selection. So now just press R, and we'll rotate that about 8 or 9 degrees to match the blueprints. And then I'll left click to place it there. Alright, let's go back down to the menu now, and we'll switch that back to bounding box. I actually think medium point is default, but in most scenarios there's not too much of a difference between the two. They're both pretty standard. So I just like switching it to bounding box because the hotkey for that is simply the comma key, so it's very easy to press. And now let's add some thickness to this. So go over to the modifiers, click add modifier, and add in a solidify. This is going to automatically add some thickness to our object. So now we just need to match it up with the photo here. So it looks like we'll need a negative value. So I'm just going to decrease that until it matches the photo. So it looks like a value of negative 0.05 is perfect for that. Alright, there we go. And now what we'll do is soften up this bend right here. So let me hold Alt, right click on that edge there. And let me just rotate the view a little bit like this. Actually, let's go in front view. So I'll press numpad 1. And I'll press Control and B to bevel this, to soften it up to match the photo like that. Now press Z for wireframe, and it only created one segment for us. So let me press the T key, and we have our operator menu over here. Let's increase the number of segments to 3, I think looks good. Yeah, that looks fine to me. Alright, let me tab out of edit mode, and I'll choose smooth shading for this in the left side toolbar, then press T to get rid of that. So now we just need to bevel the edges to make this look nice and detailed. So let me add in a bevel modifier. And we'll set this, because right now it's beveling every single edge. So we'll set this to angle. So any angle above 30 degrees will be beveled. And it looks like by default that is beveling every edge I wanted to. Let's increase the number of segments to 3. And see how that looks. Alright, that's looking pretty good to me. Now we're pretty much done with the low poly version of this. So let me press Shift and D to duplicate it, right click to keep it in place. Then I'll press the M key and move it to the second layer with our other low poly objects. Now let's select this, and to make this a little bit more high resolution, I'll go to Add Modifier and select Subdivision Surface. And we'll set that to level 2. Alright, so this piece is finished now. Alright, now let's press numpad 1 for front view. And it's not quite centered over the handle piece right here. So I'm going to hold Shift and then press number 2 on the number row to enable both the first and second layer. Then I'll right click there to select that object, hold shift and right click to select the other one. So we have the low and high poly objects selected now. I'm going to move these over to the left a little bit. So I'll press G and then X. Just move it over to the left until it's pretty much centered on top of the handle there. And then press enter. Alright, now press 1 on the number row to go back to the first layer. And now we can get started on the knife blade. Now to start on the blade, let's make sure the cursor is centered again. So I'll press Shift and S and choose cursor to center yet again. And now let's press Shift and A while we're in object mode. And we'll add in a new mesh plane. Now press Tab to go into edit mode. And I'll press Z for wireframe. Then I'll press S to scale that down and then G to move it into place. Right like that. So I'm scaling it up to the size of the knife in the reference photo, just moving it right on top of the handguard like that. And now let's add a couple of edge loops for the edges we know for the edges we can see on the photo reference. So I'll press Ctrl and R right around there to create a vertical loop cut. Then left click and I'll drag it right there where the knife starts dipping down for the point. And let me press Ctrl and R right there to get a horizontal loop cut. I'll left click there and I'll place it right there for the bottom edge of this. And we'll add one right above that as well. So let's press Ctrl and R through here again, left click, and we'll drag this down to right about there. And then left click. All right, let me press Ctrl and up for full screen. I don't think we'll need any modifiers for a little while. And let me zoom out a little bit. Then I'll hold Alt and right click on that edge there to select all those vertices. Then I'll press G and then Z, and I'll move it up to right about there, right where this starts separating right here. And now I'll press E to extrude it and then Z to move it on the Z axis, and I'll extrude it up to right there because we have a directional change here. And then we'll extrude it up again to this point right here. So press E and then Z and extrude it up to right there. Now we can start, since everything's coming inward to a point, we got to start moving these vertices around. So I'll select that vertex and simply press G twice to slide it along the edge sideways and then match up with the photo reference like that. Same thing with this. I'll select that, press G twice, and slide it to the right, right at that intersection right here. And then this, we'll press G twice and slide it over to the edge of the blade. All right, so that's looking good, but we need some edges coming down this line right here. So I'll use the knife tool for that. So I'll press the K key, left click on that vertex there, drag it down to that edge, and click on that edge while we're following the guide of the reference photo. And then let's bring it down to that vertex, make sure it highlights, left click on it, and then press enter. All right, so off to a good start with that. All right, so we're gonna need to add some extra edge loops in this area here to round this off. So let me press Ctrl and R right through there, and then I'll scroll up on the mouse until I have 4 cuts, and then left click, and then right click to keep them in the middle. And do the same thing on the other side. Now let's join these together. So select 2 vertices at a time and press the J key, and it'll create an edge between them, and do that all the way down. All right, now I want to move these vertices right to the edge of the knife there, but as you can see, the ones down here are a little bit off. It's because our reference photo isn't perfectly straight. It's not perfectly aligned. So what I'm going to do is select all of these vertices by pressing B for the box select. Just left click and drag over them all. Then I'll zoom in up here. I'll press G and then X, and I'll move that into alignment with the reference photo there, just so we can more easily follow along the knife's edge as we're shaping this. And the same thing on the right side. This is a little bit off. So I'll select that. And actually an easy way to select a whole line of vertices is to select one, hold Control, and then right click on the other one. It selects the whole line of vertices in between them. So with all of them selected, I'll zoom in up here, press G and then X, and move that to the right side of the blade like that. And we're a little bit off on this edge right here as well. So I'll do the same thing, select that, hold Control, select the bottom vertex, then we'll zoom in up here, press G and then X, and move it into alignment like that. And let's hold Alt, right click on that edge right there to select the whole loop of it. And we're going to make this aligned with that edge right there. So I'll press G and then Z and move it down until that's aligned. All right, so now we can go up here and start shaping things. So let's select one vertex at a time on the left side. I'll press G and then X and move it to match up with the photo. And we'll do that all the way up the line. Now we'll do the same thing with the inner vertices right here, but we can use edge slide for this, or vertex slide. So I'll select that vertex, then press G twice and slide it over into place like that. And we'll do that all the way up the line. Now let's work on the next set of edges or set of vertices, and we'll do the same thing. Just select one, press G twice, and slide it over the blueprint line. It's a little bit more faint on this side, so just kind of guessing and making sure we just have a nice smooth curve all the way up, like that. Now let's go to the right side here. And looks like that's in place, and that is too. I'll select this one, press G twice, slide it to the left, and I'll do that all the way up. All right, there we go. So just take a look at your curves now, make sure they're all nice and smooth. I think they look good enough. Maybe I'll take that one, press G, move it to the right just a touch. All right, that looks good. All right, let's add some dimension to this now. So what I'll do is select all the vertices that are going to be part of the thick part of the blade. So let me press A to deselect everything. Then I'll press the C key for circle select, and I'll left click and drag over all of these vertices right here. And let me zoom down here, because I also want to select that vertex and that one there. Whoops, and that corner. All right, so with all these vertices selected, let's go into side view by pressing numpad 3. And now we're going to add some thickness, but we're going to keep in mind that we're going to mirror this to the other side. So I'm going to zoom in real far until the grid gets really tiny. And then I'll press G, hold Control, and move it to the left. I'm going to move it to the left 0.05. And then left click. And let's make sure that's the right thickness. So I'm going to press Control and up to get out of full screen. And I'll add in a mirror modifier. And this will be mirrored on the Z-axis. All right, that definitely looks like the right thickness to me. All right, let me tab back into edit mode, and I'll press the Z key for wireframe view, and then press numpad 1 for front view. We're going to add an extra edge loop in here for this edge right there. So let me press Control and R right through there to add an edge loop. I'll left click, and then I'll press the E key to align it with the left side edges. And we'll drag that to match the thickness in the photo. Actually, I think I want mine to be a little bit thicker, so I'll bring it out to there, and then left click. Yeah, I think that looks good. And now let's hold Shift, and I'll right click on that and that to deselect them. We're going to have to go into top view and pull this down in order to create a difference in angle there. So now I'll press numpad 7 for top view, then press the Z key for shaded view, and I'll zoom in. Now I'll press G and then Y, and we'll move it down like that until we have the right sharpness we want. I think that looks about right. And I'll left click there. And how's that looking? Cool, there we go. Not bad, not bad. All right, let me tab back into edit mode. Now our back edge right here comes to a point, but it's actually a little bit rounded right here. It has some thickness. So let me select that vertex, hold Control and select that one to select them all. Then I'll press numpad 7 for top view, and we'll move this down a little. So let me zoom in. I'll press G and then Y, and I'll hold Control and Shift for very tiny incremental movements like that. And we'll move that down 0.006. Looks good to me, and I'll left click to confirm that. And let me take a look. So that looks better. All right, let me press numpad 1 for front view, and I'll tab back into edit mode. Now we're going to work on the top of the knife here. And we'll start on the rim over here, the knife's edge. So let me select these two vertices, and I'm going to extrude these up 6 times to the tip. And I can actually do that in a very easy way that also rotates the vertices along the curve that we're extruding. And you can do that by simply holding Control and then left clicking along the knife's edge like that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're going to have to space these out, but at least we got things planted down. And now let's flatten this up here. So I'll press R and I'll rotate that until it's flat. Then press G and move it into place over here. Let me select the top vertex. I'll press G and then Z and move it up, just to give it the same width as the rest of the knife's edge. And now we can space these out a little bit more evenly. Now remember that Loop Tools add-on? Well, that also has a spacing option, which can automatically space these vertices out for us. So let me select that vertex, hold Control, select the top one, then press W, and in the Loop Tools special menu, select Space. That will space them out evenly along that curve for us. And we'll do the same thing with the vertices below that. And there we go. Now they get a little stretch down here. These are pointing down, but we're going to have these edges going over to the right. So let me select that. I'll press G twice and slide it up just a little bit. I'll do the same thing for this, and maybe for that. Now let's just make sure that all of these are following the knife's edge. So I'll select those two vertices, press G, and move them to the right a little bit. Alright, now let's select this vertex, hold Shift and select that one, and press F to create an edge between them. Now if you go into side view, you can see that's going down toward the tip for us now. And let's go back into front view. Now let's create 5 vertices in here to match up with the vertices over there. So I'll press Control and R, hover over that, and then scroll up on my mouse until I have 5 cuts, and then left click. And now let's get all of these into place. So I'll select each one, press G and then X, and move it over onto the reference photo. Alright, let me zoom out, and now I'll select these bottom vertices right there and press F all the way up until it connects to the top. And now we just need some vertices down the right side. So with that vertex selected, I'll hold Shift and select that one, and then press F to create an edge. And then press Control and R. Actually, before we do that, let's make sure that's straight. Let me press numpad 3 for side view. So we should have a straight edge right there. But as you can see, mine is going off to the left just slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'll select that vertex, hold Control, then select that one. I'll select the entire line of vertices, and it makes this the last selection, so it becomes the active selection. Now let's go down into the pivot point menu and set active element as the pivot point. That's going to allow us to scale and rotate around our active selection. So I'll press numpad 3 for side view, and we're going to flatten this out by scaling it on the Y-axis. So I'll press S, and as it's scaling in toward my active selection, I'll press the Y key to constrain it to the Y-axis, then hold Control, and scale it all the way into the active selection down to 0, and then left click. So now we have a perfectly flat line. Alright, let me press numpad 1 for front view, and let's add 5 vertices in here the same way we did over here. So I'll press Control and R, scroll up on the mouse until I have 5 cuts, then left click. And I'll just go through and I'll line these up with a reference photo. Well, it looks like we're a little bit to the left of the edge of the reference photo, so I'll just follow that as a guide all the way up. So I'll press G and then X, move to the left a little bit, and we'll do that all the way up the line. Now these top 2 vertices here should be a straight edge. So I don't want this going into the left there, so I'm going to select that, press G and move it to the right a little bit. And same thing with this. And let's zoom out and see our curve. It looks pretty good. I'll select that, move it to the right a little bit. And there we go, that looks good. Now let me select these 2 vertices there and press F all the way up to the top. Alright, now it's looking like a knife.